What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut, and today we're going to be discussing the Nomar Garciaparra trade, which occurred back on July 31st, 2004. Now, this was a four-team trade between the Chicago Cubs, Boston Red Sox, Montreal Expos, and Minnesota Twins, and it saw Chicago net shortstop Nomar Garciaparra. Now, why did this trade occur, you may ask? So Boston, they feared that Garciaparra was going to walk in free agency after the 2004 season came to an end. The team, they had actively attempted to sign free agent shortstop Alex Rodriguez in the previous offseason, and this deeply upset Nomar. This, coupled with Nomar's injury history and suspect defense, led to Boston saying, you know what, enough is enough. They decided to trade him. So we'll start by discussing the Chicago Cubs. So the Cubs got a pair of players, both of whom came from the Boston Red Sox. The first one was shortstop Nomar Garciaparra. Now, he was bothered by an Achilles injury for the remainder of the 2004 season. He still had a solid season for the team, hitting just below 300. The Cubs did miss the playoffs, but Boston did go on to break their curse. We'll get to that in a little bit. His former teammates, they voted to give him a ring for his contributions both on and off the field, though. Now, Garciaparra, he ended up signing a one-year extension with the team, and he had a slow start to the 2005 season, but he ended up tearing a muscle, which forced him to miss 3 months. He did rebound, and he played well to end the season, but Chicago said, you know what, we've seen injuries enough. They let him walk as a free agent. So then they also got outfielder Matt Merton from the Red Sox, and he was called up to the major leagues in summer of 2005, and he played well in a reserve role. He ended up earning a starting role in 2006, and he was decent, but not good enough to keep that role as he was moved back to a reserve spot in the 2007 season, which actually included a brief stint in the minors. Now, he was moved to an outfielder 5 role in the 2008 season before he ends up getting traded as a part of a big trade to the Oakland Athletics. Now, we'll get to Oakland in a little bit. We'll start by discussing who the Cubs got. So they got a pair of pitchers. The first one is starting pitcher Rich Harden. And Harden, he had a solid end to the 2008 season, but he did regress slightly in the 2009 season. He still was serviceable, though, and he did walk after a year and a half. They also got pitcher Chad Colden, and Colden had a rough half season, which led to him getting released before the end of the 2008 season. So that's what Chicago got. How did the other three teams do? We'll start with Boston, of course. They're the ones who gave away Nomar. So they got 2 players from 2 different teams. The first one we'll look at is shortstop Orlando Cabrera, whom they got from the Montreal Expos, and he had a solid half season in Boston where he provided a gold glove at the shortstop position, and he was pretty good offensively as well. He wasn't Nomar offensively, but he was much better than Nomar defensively. Now, he would be allowed to walk after the team went on to win the World Series. Now, they also got first baseman Doug Mientkiewicz from the Minnesota Twins. And Mientkiewicz he wasn't as good as Cabrera, but he still has a major role in Boston. So he spent a half season as a good defensive glove at first base. Now, he wasn't great offensively, but defensively, he was a massive upgrade. And, these guys combined to make Boston pitchers feel more comfortable allowing ground balls, so that always was good. Now, he ends up, after a ground ball goes to the pitcher in the 9th inning of the 4th game of the 2004 World Series, Mientkiewicz ends up getting tossed the World Series clinching out, which, of course, he made with no problem. And then there was a bit of a controversy that ensued with who got the baseball. It's actually in Cooperstown now, but he thought that he would keep it. Boston said they wanted it. Now, he ends up getting traded after this half season. And he's traded to the New York Mets for a prospect first baseman named Ian Blader-Groden. And Blader-Groden, he doesn't even make it above high A for the team. So it is what it is. So next in the 4-team trade, we have the Montreal Expos, who got 3 players, all of whom came from the Chicago Cubs. The first one was shortstop Alex Gonzalez, and he spent a month and a half on the team before leaving. He didn't do much. They also got relief pitcher Francis Beltran, and he would struggle over a half season, but he did pitch the final out for the Expos before they became the Nationals. He ended up missing the entire 2005 season due to an injury, and he spent the 2006 season in the minors before he was released. They also got infielder Brendan Harris, and Harris would appear in 41 games across parts of 3 years for the team. Most of this time, though, was spent in the minors. Now, he was okay at the major league level, but he ends up getting traded in a big trade with the Cincinnati Reds. He was traded alongside 4 other players for 3 players. So the first one we'll look at for Montreal was second baseman shortstop Felipe Lopez, and he spent roughly 2 years as a starter on the Washington/Montreal team. It was all Nationals time though. And he was okay offensively, but he was among the league's worst fielding shortstops, so he ends up getting cut after those 2 years. They also got outfielder Austin Kearns. Kearns spent 3.5 years as the Nationals' primary right fielder, but he dealt with various injuries that eventually would end up leading to his release. Lastly, they got relief pitcher Ryan Wagner, and he pitched to an ERA north of 5 over 40 appearances before he was also released. So lastly, in the original 4-team trade, we have the Minnesota Twins, and they would acquire starting pitcher Justin Jones from the Chicago Cubs, and Justin Jones bounced around the minors for a couple of years, but never made it above Double-A before being allowed to walk. So we have 3 more teams to discuss. We'll start by discussing the Oakland Athletics. Now, the Athletics got 4 players in exchange for 2, and the first one that we're going to look at is outfielder Matt Merton. Now, Merton would appear in 9 games, but he struggled and ended up moving to the bench. And he ends up getting traded after that season. We will not be discussing that trade. Now, one of the big names that they got was catcher, third baseman Josh Donaldson, who was a prospect at this time. And Donaldson, he made his MLB debut early in the 2010 season. He would appear in a handful of games, but he ended up back in the minors where he remained until opening day of 2012. Now, he ends up getting moved from the catcher spot to third base spot, but he was a catcher originally. And he ends up getting named the starting third baseman for the 2012 season. He would have a slow start to the season, and he was sent back to AAA to end the season. He ends up earning the starting role once more in 2013, and he ended the 2013 season on a tear. He had another very strong season in 2014, increasing his power output, but he did see his batting average drop slightly. He ends up getting traded away for salary concerns, and this actually did earn its own video back in 2020, so that will be linked in the description below. But he was a one-time All-Star for the Oakland Athletics. Now, we also have 2 more players that Oakland got. The first one here is outfielder Eric Patterson. And Patterson, over parts of 3 years, he played about half the time. He was like a bit of a platoon bat. He was an okay player before being designated for the assignment. They also got starting pitcher Sean Gallagher, and he was a decent innings eater for parts of 2 years before he was traded away. We will not be discussing that. Next, we have the New York Mets, who got first baseman Doug Mientkiewicz. And Mientkiewicz began the 2005 season as a starting first baseman, but his somewhat poor play, ended up leading to him to being benched to end the year, and then he would walk as a free agent. Lastly, we have the Cincinnati Reds, who got 5 players. The first one, of course, is outfielder Brendan Harris, and he went 2 for 10 in the majors for their team before he was traded away. We will not be discussing that. They also got relief pitcher Gary Majewski, who appeared out of the bullpen 88 times for the team over 3 years, but struggled with a 7.38 earned run average before he was allowed to walk. They got another reliever in Bill Bray, who spent 6.5 years on the team, but he did miss a year with Tommy John after getting Tommy John surgery. He had a career 3.72 earned run average over 239 appearances for the team. He also had a 12-11 record with 3 saves, so he wasn't horrible. They got another pitcher in Daryl Thompson, and he bounced around the system for 6 seasons, appearing at 4 games at the major league level, but he struggled in the majors and he was eventually released or allowed to walk. Lastly, they also got shortstop Royce Clayton, and Clayton walked after being a decent player but not spectacular over 40 games. So that was the Nomar Garciaparra trade. I hope you guys enjoyed this. As a person who grew up in the Northeast, I definitely know Nomar, and a lot of Boston fans, and a lot of fans in general, say that Nomar would be in the Hall of Fame if it weren't for his injuries. I'm one of those people. He was a great player, but he just couldn't stay healthy. It's good that he at least got to be, got the 2004 ring, I guess. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a good rest of your day.